All right. Hey, everybody. We're going to finish out Module 4's lectures. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to talk about the male privilege checklist real quick. Oh, I got a typo. What is not on this list that you guys think might be an option is one of those questions I like to pose at this. I'm going to talk about a couple of them I want to point out, and then we're going to talk about privilege. Okay. So, a couple of these I want to read just as we go through them. One of them is number 12. If I have children and a career, no one will think I'm selfish for not staying home. Think about how that differs between the role expectations of motherhood and the role expectations for fatherhood, and how that's gendered in a very particular way to garner economic privilege and opportunities for men. And we'll get more into that as we do work in Module 5. Number 15, when I ask to see the person in charge, odds are I will face a person of my own sex. The higher up in the organization the person is, the surer I can be of this. So when we talk about CEO levels of companies, or we talk about really the general makeup of most structured job workplaces, it is rare to see women towards the top. It is even more rare to see persons of color or females of color at the top. So really structuring how we talk about the privilege of getting to see someone that is like us make decisions that impact our ability to do our job and what our job actually entails really has very, very different outcomes. Number 22, if I am careless about driving, it won't be attributed to my sex. And I kind of talk about this as a funny because let's be honest, when we talk about our road rage issues, and or we talk about someone being a bad driver around us, like how many times does that stupid broad or that stupid woman have come out of either your parents' mouths when you were growing up or even your own? Versus someone that generally says like usually if we talk about male drivers negatively, it's talking about their aggressive behaviors or something to that effect. And that happens far less likely. So just how something so silly and so simple can be talked about as a way of examining gender differences within our society. Number 22, oh no, we just did that. Number 26, my clothing is typically less expensive and better constructed than women's clothing for the same social status. While I have fewer options, my clothes will probably fit better than a woman's without tailoring. Let's just talk about pockets for a second. I mean, all of the females who watch this will tell you that we rarely have pockets. And if we do, they're like, they don't fit our phones. They don't fit the things that we would carry in pockets. So really talking about the structural differences of what it is we expect out of clothing and how that clothing represents and or causes difference, right? Number 29, if we're not conventionally attractive, the disadvantages are relatively small and easy to ignore, right? Okay, so you have to fit a lot of idyllic types about a woman in order to create or be seen in ways that are positive. And that just doesn't happen for the alternative. Even if you look at politicians, the politicians, female politicians that run, their clothing, the way they look is consistently scrutinized. I do not see anybody scrutinizing old white men and their inability to meet male archetype body type structures, right? Like I just don't see that. And you don't see that because there is a privilege to being male in this way that their looks are not always contributed to their success, and their success is not dependent on their looks. And that is a very different structure than is set up for women in our society. I want to talk about 31 for just a brief second, because again, things like this is what I study. And so it's important to me to kind of call out. I can ask for legal protection from violence that happens mostly to men without being seen as selfish or a special interest, since the kind of violence is called crime and is a general social concern. Violence that happens mostly to women, especially, is usually called domestic violence or acquaintance rape and is seen as a special interest case. So we're talking here about the access to basic human protection and the level at which safety is a privilege that men get to experience in a way that women don't always get to and generally don't. Now, I will make a caveat that race intersects with gender in a very peculiar way in this situation, and where when you talk about those who experience violence, um, uh, Black males are exceedingly high on that list and are at the top, probably only passed up by transgendered individuals of either orientation, right? So of any ways, non-binary and trans persons generally experience violence at a higher rate than any other category. And so really just talking about the ways in which safety interplays with gender in very particular ways, and the access to legal justice with that is very different depending on gender. And again, that is also has a very big intersection with race and class and other options. Number 36, every major religion in the world is led primarily by people of my own sex. Even God in most major religions is pictured as male. Pretty much that says kind of what we're talking about, but like I just want to point it out that when you start thinking about the structured ways in which we learn gender, we also, if we're doing that within any kind of religious framework, we're doing that with the hierarchy and the most important people of that religion generally being of this male archetype. So really having that consciousness of understanding how these hierarchies are perpetuated within multiple institutions, including religion. And then really number 41, assuming I am heterosexual, magazines, billboards, television, movies, pornography, and virtually all other media is filled with images of scantily clad women intended to appeal to my sexuality. Such images of men exist, but are far rarer. And also, when we talk about this, again, those standards for beauty and that male gaze, we're talking about the way in which males are privileged, especially heterosexual males, are privileged in having media designed specifically for them in comparison to a lot of other groups, right? And the messaging behind that is that, hey, here, this is something that can belong to you, as opposed to this is something you need to change about yourself, like when we talked about the advertising that was geared towards with the lightning products. So, I wanted to define privilege real quick because sometimes this gets, especially with as much as it's talked about and white privilege is being talked about in the media and male privilege gets talked about and pushed around. I want to make sure that we're being very clear on what privilege is. It does not mean that you don't struggle. It means that whatever the source of privilege is, say whiteness, say male, is not the source of your oppression or discrimination. So you can be economically disadvantaged while still having male privilege, in the sense that your opportunities or resources and things within that disadvantage are going to be different than those that do not have that whiteness, or do not have this male, or do not have this specific age, or that are not heterosexual, right? So just because you are privileged in one area of your life does not mean all of your identities equal that same privilege, or that those privileges, that male privilege will circumvent some of those other oppressions. That is not what I'm saying, but it does mean that these ideas of what it is to be, or these ideas of this privilege checklist does not, may still apply to you as being male, when it would not apply to a female, no matter their other identity categories. Privilege really is talking about this ability to access options and opportunities, right? It's the ability to gain resources, that ability to gain options and opportunities to those resources that allow us an ability to have a safety net or a structural social support. In some cases that means safety. In other cases it might mean monetarily. In other cases it might mean access to better, to lack of social sanctions, right? And I highlighted a few of those examples in here. So that's all I'm really going to say about that. But if you have any questions and or you're still struggling with this ideal of privilege, we can talk about it in other ways. And I have other articles that might help kind of garner that understanding between the difference between having and accessing opportunities based on being male, and having and accessing opportunities based on other sources of hierarchy and oppression. So again, as always, reach out if you need anything, and I will see you again shortly.